So today we're going to talk about choosing our preferred polarity in tantric intimacy or in tantric romance or relationships, where we want to have a dynamic relationship. Sometimes we just want to have a comfortable relationship, that we're just really friends that live together, that love each other, that maybe we have sex, but we're not seeking that dynamic passion. If we seek the dynamic passion, then we polarize into the masculine and feminine for the erotic aspects of a relationship. Like some people ask me, like, well, I don't want to, let's say you like being in the feminine. And they'll say, well, I don't want to not have any say. I don't want to just have to do what the other person says or have them make all the decisions in the relationship. And that's not what this is. This is just in eros, in the romantic parts of the relationship, that one person is strengthened by being in the masculine polarity, and the other person is strengthened by being in the feminine. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail into what the masculine and feminine mean, because we've talked about that in the other videos. But essentially, this means that the person who prefers to be in the masculine, who actually is strengthened by it, is strengthened by giving, is strengthened by sort of getting their ducks in a row and leading and paying attention to others. It's almost like imagining the power and centeredness you have to muster if you're put in charge of a group at work. So you've got a team of 6 people and you've got to create this event or you've got to create this product, and you're put in charge. So you can do this in the old-fashioned masculine way, where it's in separation, it's in domination, and you simply make a plan and you make everyone else do it. But that's actually not the most powerful way, and it's not the most efficient or the most enjoyable. The true masculine in that way sees everyone in the group, assesses how everyone's gifts, right? Like, this person's the numbers person, this is the social person, this is the one that gets the work done, and they understand everyone in the group, and they rise to the challenge of creating a way of getting this done that maximizes everyone's gifts, everyone's joys, everything. So suddenly the group becomes this symbiotic experience. And their job was to bring themselves up to the task of figuring that out. That's what I mean by being strengthened by being in the masculine, because this is something that's good for us. And it may not be something even we've ever done, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but it's something that actually makes us feel stronger. It's almost like it forces our spine into alignment, and no matter how many blows we may have taken in our past, in this moment, we stand on our own 2 feet and we hold our head high and we feel strong. So that's what I mean. Do you feel empowered by being in the masculine? And now, to understand that all of us have to have this imbalance in our own life. So me as a person, I have to be able to do that for me, say in my business or in my life, where I have to make choices. I have to muster myself. I have to do that. We all need to do that in our life. What we're talking about is it empowering in relationship? That's the question, in romantic relationship. And that's a different question. Or maybe you are empowered and strengthened by being in the feminine in relationship. So what does that mean? That means that through releasing control, and again, I'm not talking about control in the relationship, like where we're going. I mean in romance. I mean, somebody says, you know what? I've created a beautiful evening for us. Get ready, maybe bring a bathing suit or whatever, and just relax. And your job and your strengthening journey is to say, okay, I'm going to release control. I'm going to trust this person, and I'm going to allow myself to flow in this beautiful gift that's being given to me. That's no small thing for a lot of people to actually take our hands off the wheel and our foot off the gas and allow someone else to drive. But there's a thrill in it. When you're with someone who is a healthy masculine, they're not planning something you're not going to like. They're planning something that you are going to like because they're connected to you, right? To be able to relax and it's like, oh, come on, tell me where we're going. I'm not telling you. Oh, come on, come on, come on, tell me. Nope. And to actually relax and flow. Not only is this enjoyable, it expands you as a person because suddenly now you're out in life and the world has thrown you some circumstance and there's nothing you can do about it, right? This is out of your control. But now you have a bigger muscle inside that allows you to say, okay, I'm surrendering to it. I'm going to flow with it. And now I can make choices within that surrender, right? It's so empowering. In this case, also, there's a strengthening again in the ability to trust other. And again, depending on our childhood, depending on our past, maybe even ancestral trauma, karmic patterns, all kinds of things, trust in another human might be really difficult. To understand that all of this is assuming the other person is trustworthy. Like, for example, I used to teach ballroom dance and Latin dance years ago in a previous life. And I would often teach couples how to dance their first dance. And it was really interesting. So I would choreograph something, they would pick their favorite song, and we'd have, 6 or 8 classes together, like private lessons, so that they would have this beautiful first dance. And I remember one couple, she really wanted to dance. He didn't. So he was being kind of lackadaisical, like, I don't even care. This is dumb. It's all the woman's idea. He was kind of like that. But whatever. It's not my decision to decide whether they should dance or whether they should not. But that's okay. So then my job then is to teach him how to lead and teach her how to follow. And then to actually get them to dance together. And then to actually allow them to be a union and have him fully leading and her fully following. Because you can tell when people are dancing, whether they're just co-dancing or whether they're actually together and they're flowing as one. So theoretically, at someone's wedding, you would love to watch them flow as one, right? So that's the goal. Well, he basically wasn't really paying attention. He didn't really care, but he was learning and he did get it and he could hear the beat. So there was all kinds of potential for this to work out. She was learning all of her steps, all was well. They were moving through the choreography. Everything was okay. And then there came the day that I needed him to actually step into the lead and she had to actually follow. And so what I often would do is I would say, okay, to the feminine partner, you need to close your eyes and allow him just to lead you. And in ballroom, the feminine, the follower, is generally moving backwards. So they are truly having to trust completely. Well, there was a stage set up in the corner of the ballroom because I was having a concert that night. And it was kind of it was like rough cut plywood. So it wasn't really good because there were going to be like rugs over it and stuff later. But its raw thing was actually quite sharp. And so I told him, I said, whatever you do, don't lead her towards the stage because, she's going to hit the back of her heels and it's going to hurt. And he was like, yeah, I get it. So he starts leading her around and he starts getting closer and closer to that stage. And she's getting nervous, right? She's kind of getting fidgety. Like she cannot trust this guy. She cannot relax and follow. And they kept getting closer and closer. And I'd say, just be careful over there. And he'd get closer and closer and he backed her right into that stage. And I got really mad, like theoretically I'm supposed to be this teacher or whatever, but I'm like, why would you do that? She was trusting you. And he starts laughing. He's like, yeah, but it was hilarious. Like she had her eyes closed. She had no choice. Like it was hilarious. And I'm like, that's not funny. If this is sort of the spirit of the relationship, none of these things work, especially not the follow. The feminine follow is 100% dependent on a healthy, confident, loving lead. So it's very important that this is not a power dynamic. This is not a proving something that one person's more powerful than the other, one person has more control over the other. This is a leading and following in union, in love. And so I just really want to make that clear, because there's a lot of weird teachings out there where if you want to be in the feminine, that you suddenly just have to give up control and do whatever the masculine says. This is an entirely different paradigm. This is all based in my book, The Divine Union of the Masculine and Feminine. And see this yin-yang symbol? See how it's flowing? It's flowing into each other. It's in union. It's connected. It's not, these aren't warring factions. These are like loving movements together. That is the goal of the masculine and feminine here. So just to be really clear that everything we're talking about is in an entirely different paradigm than what we might be used to. So we're talking about choosing your masculine or feminine polarity. Which is the one that you thrive in? Which is the one that you are empowered in? And that is an entirely different question than which one do you prefer out of safety. So we're just going to talk about some of the challenges for a minute. Because we have lived in a world that is based in separation and based within a domination paradigm where everything is a power struggle, those people are in charge and you just have to do what you're told. Parents, school, government, fathers, whatever it is, church, they're in charge, you do as you're told. That's a domination paradigm. This entire teaching is all based in a paradigm of connection with no domination. So it's very important. But what this means in terms of choosing our polarity is, let's say that you actually would love to release into the feminine polarity. Let's say that's actually your growth edge. That would be actually absolute bliss. But you were raised in a home where you were heavily controlled and your ideas weren't considered and your preferences weren't considered, right? Maybe you were handled roughly. Maybe you were hurt and abused emotionally, physically, whatever. Maybe you were oppressed, through church, school, government, family, whatever, and maybe you just simply were never considered. You easily will grow up saying, forget being in the feminine. I'm in control. I'm in control of my life. I'm in control of my relationships. I'm in control of you, period. So they're going to choose a partner that can be controlled, that's passive, that will go along with them, that will just whatever. Well, so for example, if we take like a heterosexual model, in all the years I taught dance, never once did I meet a couple that I said, oh, the man, you should actually be following and the woman should be leading. Because it never was actually the dynamic where the energy would flow properly. So all of these dynamics apply to all relationships, same sex, heterosexual, it doesn't matter, right? So right just for a moment, I'm going to talk about the heterosexual model, but this works exactly the same in a same-sex couple. Because in a same-sex couple, if it's dynamic, if it's just not, there are so many heterosexual and same-sex couples out there that are not dynamic. They are two friends who love each other that hang out, or that they don't love each other, but they still hang out. Those exist in all ways. I'm talking about dynamic, romantic relationships. In these relationships, regardless of orientation, one person will thrive and be empowered by being in the masculine, and one will be empowered by being in the feminine. But just for simplicity, because we have more history in this, I'm going to talk about a heterosexual model. Many of the women who came to my couples dance classes dragged their husbands there. My dance studio was in a very small town in rural Ontario, Canada, and the men were not dancers, as opposed to when I lived in Toronto, where there were so many men because they were coming out of Colombia and Mexico and all these places where men danced. This is out here. Out here is literally like white men can't jump, like white men don't dance. That's a sort of rural Ontario. So the women would drag the men there. And inevitably, these women, most of them, were control freaks. And I don't mean that in a negative way, like they're losers. I just mean they had learned in their life that they had to be in charge or else their life wouldn't be what they wanted it to be. Maybe they were raised in big families where, if they didn't stand up, nothing was going to happen because they would just get lost in the fray. Maybe they were raised by parents who were never there, and they weren't considered, and they were just like, well, if I don't get it done, then no one's going to do it. And so you get into this relationship and you're always in control. Now, to realize this isn't masculine, this is just control. This is control that we've developed because of the domination paradigm we've lived within, because we've been on the tail end of being oppressed, being controlled, whatever. And we're like, forget that. So very often they would choose a partner who, of course, was very passive. So now I have a dance class and I somehow have to shift the polarity. I have to shift the man into the masculine polarity to lead and shift the woman just on a heterosexual model. We had lots of same-sex couples too, which the same dynamics happened, right? I now had to convince the women to actually follow. And what was really interesting is, especially in a big group class, they're all lined up, but kind of all the followers are on one side and the leaders are on the other. And if they stayed with the same couple, the follower would keep kind of picking at the leader, right? They would be like, you're not doing it right. You should be doing it this way. You're not, right? That control would continue into the dance floor and they would never follow. And the leader would never develop the confidence to lead. This is why if you've ever gone to group dance classes, you always change partners all night. You keep changing partners. You learn a move, you change partners. You learn another move, you change partners. Because that's the only thing that will force the leaders to become good leaders, and it will force the followers to learn to follow. So there's this weird transitional period where both are quite uncomfortable as they're developing this new skill of leading and following, because in the rest of their life, they're either just being super controlling or super passive, right? So there's this interesting dynamic in the meantime, until a few weeks later, the leaders are feeling more confident in their role, the followers are feeling more confident in the leader's ability to lead, and then magic starts to happen. And magic starts to happen within these couples who have had these flipped power dynamics in their relationships. Suddenly, the men, just a heterosexual model, the men are standing taller, their shoulders are back. It's amazing. And the feminine, the women, are smiling and they're relaxed and they're beaming, right? And again, same in same-sex couples. So for those women, their growth edge is being able to surrender, because they've had to be in control their whole life. Their growth edge is to surrender, trust, relax, flow with what is. So that's what I mean, that it strengthens them, right? It expands their experience of life. On the flip side, let's say you're a man in this heterosexual model who has learned through life that if you stick your neck out, you're going to be judged. And soon you decide, you know what? I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to be made fun of. I don't want to be mocked by people because I tried something and it didn't work out. You know what? I'm just going to step back and I'm just going to be a bit more passive. I don't need to be the one that gets in trouble. I don't need to be the one that's, the discussion at the coffee table that, oh, did you hear what he did? Yeah, what an idiot. I can't believe it. And this is the world we've lived in. This isn't like some maladaptation that we've made up. We've lived in a world of judgment. So in all of us are masculine struggles. That's a whole other discussion. But especially in intimate relationships, the fear of rising up, initiating, and being rejected or doing the wrong thing or pissing the other person off, this is real. So a lot of people who have lived this with heavy judgment, that's a thing. So suddenly they don't want to do that. So their growth edge in relationship is mustering themselves to actually stick their neck out, to try something, to initiate, to get confident in their lead, to consider the other person, right? That's the growth edge. And that's where life becomes very, very interesting. This is where relationships aren't just, oh, thank God I found someone, I can relax now. You know, relationships suddenly become this really interesting arena for personal growth. And it's exciting personal growth. It's kind of like, let's say you go to CrossFit, you know, when you're in the gym and I don't know, I don't go to CrossFit, so I'm not going to be able to say the right words, but let's say you're doing some kind of barbell press or something. And you're like, okay, I'm doing it. And the coach says one more. And you're like right in that moment, you are mustering yourself. You are summoning a deeper strength. Okay, I can do it. And I did it. Can you do one more? Okay, one more. And you do another one. This is what relationships become like. And not in a way that it's work, but in a way that it's exciting, right? That you are constantly in this place of growth, because what does that person feel like after they did 2 presses they didn't think they could do? They feel empowered. They feel alive. They feel amazing. So suddenly relationships can become this kind of passionate growth, and you're doing it with someone you love, right? So now imagine, so this then becomes our original question. Which polarity would strengthen you, right? So the first thing to note, once you know what your preferred polarity would be, not your preferred, the safe polarity, but the one that would cause growth, the one that would make you feel alive, there's a bit of a transition period, right? We don't just step into it easily. Just like in the dance class, when the people are suddenly in the opposite polarity that they normally are in, the control freaks are, I'm just saying that, but mostly because it was me. When I first started dancing, my husband at the time, he didn't really like to dance, didn't feel comfortable dancing, so I would back lead him all the time. I was always controlling the dance. Even though I made it look like he was leading, I was actually guiding us around the dance floor, kind of back leading. And then in 2006, I opened a dance studio with a true dancer who had been teaching dance for 30 years. And of course, when he and I would dance, we would dance publicly at events and perform and stuff like that. He was obviously a powerful lead and a brilliant dancer. And I had to learn how to follow. Like, he would feel me kind of push against him when he would try to lead me. He'd say, Katrina, listen, like, allow me to lead you. And the fight inside of me to have to release that control, to stop thinking, to actually read his cues and actually take those cues and flow with it, there was a transition period. And it's really important to give ourselves that grace, because once you get through the transition period, then all of a sudden, I'll never forget, we were doing a bolero, which is a beautiful dance. And you're very slow and it's very floaty. And all of a sudden, I finally released that control. And it was like my head went back and my eyes rolled back and I floated around the dance floor in his arms. And he'd always actually make fun of me. He would kind of be like, Katrina, come back to earth. Because I would literally be like, oh, now this is bliss. This is epic. And suddenly the joy of following, the absolute bliss of following, overrides any desire to be in control. And in the same way, for someone who's sort of been judged their whole life, afraid of doing the wrong thing, once they actually feel the confidence and the joy in that lead, they can't go back either, right? They love that feeling. And it's not just on the dance floor. Suddenly it's easier to speak up at work. It's easier to speak up all the time. It really changes everything. I just want everyone to know who's making comments. I actually can't see the comments until I put my glasses back on, but we're almost done the talk and I will answer all your questions as soon as we're done. So thank you so much. So what if you are in a relationship right now? Then what? How do you do this? Maybe you've been in one of these power struggle dynamics for X number of years. What do you do? Well, the only thing we can do is have a conversation, to communicate, to actually say to the other person. So I'm like reading this book, Divine Union of the Masculine and Feminine, and they have this whole thing about healthy masculine and feminine that actually allows us to connect deeper and actually allows us to feel more love and more passion. And I kind of feel like I'm meant to be in the feminine, or I kind of feel like I'd like to play and expand and figure out how to be a healthy masculine. What do you think? What would you like? And to actually open it up as a conversation, right? Because the thing is, this is the growth edge of humanity. We have lived in separation for so long. Even our loving relationships, parents and children, family, loving relationships, romance, all of this is still within this domination, separation paradigm. So none of us know. This is all new. And so if you're in a relationship, to sit down and say, what do you think of this? In a little while, I'll have the audiobook ready. So then it's sometimes nice to listen to in the car together and just listen and just have a conversation about it and explore it together. And it's possible that some people are like, yeah, I'm not really into it. I don't really get it. I don't want it. And, that's a conversation. And then we all make choices one way or the other from there. But it's just something to open up as a conversation. Because, like, let's say I want to be in the feminine and I'm in a long-standing relationship where that hasn't happened. Maybe I've always been the one in control and my partner's super passive. Or maybe my partner is sort of like the guy I was talking about in the dancing, who he maybe likes being in control, but he's not actually considering me. He's not actually being kind to me. He's just sort of wanting everyone to, he's just the lord of the house and everyone has to do what he's told. Well, I can't relax into the feminine there. Either nothing will happen because I'm married to someone who's super passive, or I risk being hurt because the person who wants to be in the masculine isn't being considerate, right? So it has to be a conversation between both people. And you have to almost allow that transitional period while you work it out. And it's very fun. It's it can add a new light and a new spark to a relationship because it's a very different paradigm to look within. So let's say you're single and you're out in the dating world and you want to explore this. Well, if you prefer the masculine polarity, then this is a wonderful place to practice. Message first, take the initiative, plan the date, do whatever. And if it's not received, whatever, you're just practicing. You're just practicing this muscle, right? You're just practicing the energy of, I'm going to be in the masculine. Because the bottom line is, and I just did a talk 2 days ago about Tantric, Tantra dating and that kind of thing and how that looks. And I also did a talk about being masculine in relationships. So I would highly recommend listening to that more. But the key is that this is how I want to be in the relationship. I want to be in the masculine. So the only people that are going to respond to this are people who are going to appreciate that, who really desire to be in the feminine, right? So you're actually going to attract the people that you actually might want a longer term relationship with. Similarly, if you want to be in the feminine in relationships, watch yourself while dating. Are you the one always reaching out? Are you the one that's trying to initiate? Are you the one that doesn't believe that the other person will ever initiate? Are you the one that believes that, well, there's really no masculine people out there, no one's ever going to initiate anyway, so I've got to do it? Just to watch that, because these are all the things that condition us, that say, there's no point even being in the feminine because there's just no healthy masculine out there. Instead, just be there. Maybe put yourself out there, and anyone who actually pursues you, makes an effort, messages first, all that, they will be in the natural masculine, because you don't want to have to school someone, right? And it could be that you reach out, you meet, you hang out, and you say, you know what? I'm reading this book, or I'm learning about this new thing all about the masculine and feminine. And does this interest you? Because maybe they've never heard of it. Maybe they've only seen the unhealthy, dysfunctional power struggle. And they're like, actually, that sounds really cool. I'd love to explore that with you, right? Both are possible. Final thing I want to mention is one of the most beautiful things about this, of exploring the healthy masculine feminine relationships, is this is our personal healing from our life, from our family upbringing, perhaps our experience in school, our experience in society. All of our trauma, all of our pain comes from that dysfunctional, separated masculine feminine experience, whether it's abuse, oppression, being ignored, not considered, all this, and on both sides. Because all of us were children at some point and likely experienced some aspect of this. So we all have some work to heal the feminine. If you want to be in the masculine, this is really important. This is your life force flowing through you. But if you've only experienced that oppressive, abusive masculine, then you don't know how to access it within you either, right? You don't know how to be the healthy masculine. So suddenly practicing it, figuring it out, considering the feminine actually heals your relationship to masculine energy also. So this is so much more than just having romance and relationship. When we figure this out, we heal so many dynamics in our life that we've lived with forever. And then we can actually step forward in total health and actually have really healthy relationships with everyone going forward. It's a whole different world that I'm very excited about. All right, I'm just going to read the comments here. This story about the guy crashing the woman into the stage breaks my heart every time I hear it. I tell this story a lot. Sorry, I've got a fluff in my hair. It's so depressing and ugly. It's like, why? Why can't you be in an awesome, loving lead? Right? Well, and it's interesting, because I really like people, so I tend to analyze them, especially if they're kind of a muck. And I kind of, when I sat with him and I would look at him, what I felt, he felt like someone who had been part of a big family where it was funny to make fun of other people, like almost ever since he was a child. There's a lot of families like that sarcasm is normal. It's normal to pick on the weak one. It's normal to pick on the one that's showing emotion. That's what he felt like. He felt like he had like 7 older brothers that had just beat the crap out of him his whole life. And it was like he didn't know any other way to interact with anyone. He couldn't imagine not being sarcastic, not being mean, not being aggressive that way. And unfortunately, she probably saw the kind one inside of him and just tolerated this wounded child appearing as a man. But unfortunately, the truth was shown when he was actually placed in a true masculine role. No wonder those of us who want to be in the feminine feel nervous about letting go. And it's just important to know this, right? Just to know this. It's very important. question. How might people take on masculine energy in a romantic relationship if they are struggling or not feeling confident in other parts of their life? Like, for example, unemployment or underemployment. Well, and this is where it's really, really important, as always, that we are fully balanced within ourselves, right? None of us will be able to fully polarize into the masculine or feminine if I'm not fully masculine and feminine inside myself. So, for example, in this beautiful yin-yang moving three-dimensional system here, this has to be me first, right? I first have to have full masculine feminine. I have to be able to hear feminine inspiration and manifest it masculine. I have to hear my emotions and take action in the masculine. I have to have all of this within me. I have to balance doing and being. I have to be able to give to myself what I need. I need to have that inside of me first, or else I'm not going to have it to give to someone else. And what's worse is whatever the dysfunction is or the block within ourselves, the only thing we can do is play that out on a bigger scale, right? So let's say, for example, my inner masculine, which isn't masculine, it's just the patriarchy, is super judgmental. Like the father figure in my head or the authority figure in my head is super judgmental of me. So every time I do something wrong, it's like, you're a loser. What's wrong with you? How come you can't ever do it right? Blah, 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 blah. Well, the only thing we can do in relationship is do the exact same thing. We're going to be hypercritical of our partner. We're going to be super harsh because that's the only way we know. It's the only thing we experience inside. Similarly, let's say I repress my emotions. I don't pay attention to my own emotions, so I ignore my feminine. Well, then I'm going to ignore the feminine in you too. And your emotions are going to be a pain in my backside. And, oh my God, you're always so emotional, always so up and down. God, like you need some medication or something. What's wrong with you? Because that's what I'm doing inside. So that's where this journey tends to have to be the single journey first. But oftentimes we're already in relationship. So it's in tandem. And that's where we're watching, right? When we're watching in relationship, it's like, oh, I'm doing this in relationship. Okay, then that gives me a clue that maybe that's going on inside of me as well, right? It's the same thing even as, when people put up with abuse, right? They put up with abusive relationships. You can guarantee that their inner authority figure is more abusive because they're putting up with it out there. They're used to it. You don't want to live inside their head. It's a great question. Thank you. Can you speak to how the masculine and feminine switch back and forth? So in everyday life, we all shift based on the situation. All of us, all the time. There is no polarity preference in life. So there are times that I will be in the masculine and I'll be the shoulder to cry on for a friend who is swimming in chaos, or vice versa. Or I'm the one who's feminine, swimming in chaos, and I need someone who's being a strong, still structure for me, right? It's really, really important that we are fully able to go masculine and feminine in life, that I can give help as much as I can receive help, that I don't get stuck one way or the other, that I always have to be the one giving, or I'm always the one that's so needy. None of that. In life, we shift back and forth all the time. In passionate romantic relationships, there will be a polarity preference so that one person can fully embrace the universal energy of the masculine and pour that energy as a clear conduit into the feminine. And that's where we get to experience this moving energy of creation, right? That's the point. But even in relationship, it's not always one way. It's not 100%. There's a continuum. So the question becomes, How often in romantic relationship do you enjoy being in the masculine or in the feminine? For me personally, I'm probably a 90-10. 90% of the time, I love surrendering and flowing in the feminine. And 10% of the time, this is my game and I'm in the masculine, right? And I initiate and I kind of take over. So the key is, if I really want to have a happy relationship, that I find a partner that wants the opposite. They want to be in the masculine 90% of the time and 10% of the feminine. But maybe you're 60-40 or 80-20 or whatever. And so you easily shift. Inside a singular experience, we seldom shift, right? So like, let's say, for example, if I kind of take over and I'm like, how you doing? Come here, right? And I actually am the initiator, I'm in the masculine, likely that will see its way all the way to the end of the lovemaking session. On occasion, he may turn the tables on me and say, okay, you've had your fun. Now I'm in charge, or whatever. And it's all in fun, right? And it's pretty sexy. You don't tend to shift back and forth inside. That's masculine, right? I don't mean male, I mean masculine, that it's like a tennis match. I do this, you do this, I do this, you do this. You never get this flow happening because it's like a tennis match instead. Or it'd be like, let's say my partner, because of course I'm just speaking from the feminine. Let's say my partner's like, I've planned an evening for us, go get ready. I'll be in the car or whatever, or I'll take you to the car. I'm going to flow in that feminine all night while he flows in the masculine all night. And we're going to keep that joyful movement, right? We're going to keep this beautiful cycling all night. I'm not suddenly going to go eat, flip, and now I'm in charge of the night. And he's going to go flip. That's not how universal energy flows, right? It just flows. So it's important to be able to flow back and forth, but we practice that in life. Thanks for asking. Those conversation starters on how to bring this up in current relationship are brilliant. If the other person isn't into it, the choice could be leaving the relationship. It totally could be, right? And that's okay too, right? We have a lot of weird attachment to this whole till death do you part thing, right? That everything has to be forever. And it's like, does it? Like, is that real? I personally, I was married for 20 years and I believed that. I deeply believed that it was till death do you part. And I really did feel like it was a failure to cop out early, right? And I really had to dig deep and do a pile of research to kind of unravel this. Where did this till death do you part come from? And also the other pieces that, even in a relationship, maybe the other person isn't interested right now or whatever, is just to be prayerful about it, right? To actually ask ourselves, okay, do I see myself here in this relationship still? Yes or no? Yes? Huh. Okay, then there's something more for me here. Maybe it's not this, but there is another reason for me to be here, right? Like, it's always about being prayerful. It's always about asking, am I here? Am I not here? Is it time to go? Is it time to stay? And then you work within that, whatever. I like to be with a feminine man, but with one who responds to me and does not ghost me. It's very hard when they breadcrumb or ghost. How do you differentiate between feminine from ghosting bad behavior? So I wonder if we're talking about different feminine, masculine, because in this instance, we're not talking about someone who is feminine like they are not manly. It's not like that. A feminine, if you are attracted to the feminine, then you are going to be the one that's always in the masculine, right? You are the one that's going to be messaging. You're the one that's going to be planning the events. You're going to initiate intimacy. You're going to be in the masculine polarity while they're in the feminine, receiving, releasing, exploring chaos. They're in the feminine polarity. They're not necessarily feminine looking. They're in the feminine polarity while you're in the masculine polarity. So, and the hard thing with ghosting and breadcrumbing is it's all just nonsense that's happened in this current world. That's just a whole other thing. But so I'm not sure if we're talking about the same masculine, feminine. By the way, I know he is highly attracted to my masculine, looks up to me, and I'm 10 years older, but he still has lots of emotion around not feeling adequate and feels insecure around me. So this is a really common thing where in our own lives, so let's say, for example, men might be attracted to you because you're a very interesting person. You do a lot of things. You have a lot of masculine in your life and you have a lot of feminine in your life, and you have this beautiful balance, right? The challenge comes, and I talk about this in my book, that we can easily fall into archetypal patterns from our family. So if you have a natural strength about you, you may attract a male partner or a masculine partner or a partner, period, who actually falls in as a child within you. And you actually become more of a mother, and they are more of the son, the mother-son dynamic, where you're sort of doing their laundry and taking care of their needs and, making sure they're okay and all that kind of thing. But the problem is they'll never rise into that equal partnership because they need to find that inner balance themselves, So they may look up to it, but then they have to rise to it, right? I'm a big, strong person. I've got piles of masculine energy. I write books, I teach, I lead journeys and courses and stuff. Like I've piles of masculine energy in the world. I also have piles of feminine energy because that's where all the inspiration comes from. And that's where my feedback comes from and all that kind of thing. And that means that if you're going to be with me, you need to become just as big as I am, right? There's a leveling up that says, I'm not going to become smaller. Like I'm not going to decrease my masculine in life, and that's where we just find people where everyone thrives. And what I find is if I'm with someone and they are feeling emasculated just simply being with me, this is not healthy for them. They need a different partner. I'm not saying this is your situation, but being with me is not going to strengthen them if they are just living in this constant intimidation or something. They need to find someone else. And I need to find someone else because I don't want to have a child. I don't want to have that kind of relationship with someone. And this is classic. Like this is old. Like I was married 30 years ago. And even in my time of getting married, which isn't that long ago, it became this constant thing in marriages where people would say, well, how many kids do you have? And they'd say, well, I've got 3, including if you include the one I married. And that's really shitty, right? That's awful and super emasculating and super insulting. But this is what happened because, again, my sense of it is so many men, sort of that patriarchy, if you're a woman or in the feminine, we got hit, but so did they. They got hit exactly the same way we did. And they have no idea how to have a healthy masculine. They've never seen it. They have no idea. And so what do? We default to our family patterns. But today we don't have to do that. We have the consciousness. We're aware of what's going on. And we can actually look and see, okay, you know what? We've fallen into some weird mother-child relationship. And bottom line is I may love you and I may want to help you, but I don't have sex with my children. So what are we going to do? And it's really important to be really clear about that. And again, I don't know if this is actually your situation. It's just a common one. It's interesting in a gay relationship, if the polarities switch at different times, the freedom to experience both the masculine and feminine at different times in different situations. Totally. I had one friend who he said as soon as he learned about these dynamics, suddenly all of his relationships started to make sense. Because if he was with a guy who was actually, say, wanting to be in the femme, wanting to be a bottom, and he wanted to be a bottom, somebody had to switch, and they were both attracted to each other. They both wanted to be sexually intimate, so one would switch, which is fine once in a while, right? Again, it's that continuum, but once in a while, no problem. But if the relationship continued and the one that actually prefers to be in the feminine had to stay the top for long term, they actually would end up having passive aggressive arguments. They wouldn't necessarily know what was wrong, but all they knew was this isn't what they wanted. And so it was really interesting how it was so helpful to actually figure out what is right here. There was another couple I worked with, and they were two women, and it was so similar. Like the one woman she was your classic masculine woman in a lesbian relationship. She was classic, right? She was a firefighter. She had short hair. She was strong. She liked to go out and drink with her guy friends, like all those kind of things. Like it was stereotypically stereotypical. Like that's all it was, right? But she had also been really beaten down by her family. And so her confidence was like out the door. And so her partner, who actually was, again, classic feminine, stereotypically feminine, ended up having to step into that almost mother role and take care of everything and do this and sort of clean up and all that kind of thing. And eventually the relationship fell apart, you know? So what would it have taken for the first person to actually rise up into the masculine? A lot of inner work and counseling and help and healing of that childhood so that they actually would feel strong enough to be in the masculine, because of course in the relationship they never felt like they were good enough. They always felt like they were failing or not being, it was just this constant thing. And the other person who wanted to be in the feminine was absolutely exhausted, didn't know what to do, loved their partner completely, but didn't know what to do. So it's very interesting. Like these dynamics show up in all relationships where two people want to interact in a passionate way. Like it is just gender irrelevant. The idea of staying forever is kind of silly since change is always the constant in the universal experience. Totally. Yeah, when the question, what should people bring up with therapists or counselors or in the journaling to move through their polarity pain? Not sure if a lot of therapists really understand what you're talking about. I know. It's funny. This is actually one of the reasons that in a few weeks, I'm actually beginning a whole series of live Zoom calls where we're actually diving into the masculine feminine, because and part of it is actually to train people to teach people, right? To actually teach people to be able to share this with groups, for therapists to share this with their clients, because it's so different and yet we so desire it. And so it could be that you might just even have to bring the book to the counselor and say, here's what this is all about. If you're interested in it, definitely, take a look at it. And then I'd love to talk about it. But even within that, even if they don't understand, let's say you want to be in the masculine, but you're struggling and you've realized that I really struggle with confidence. I'm afraid to get in trouble. That's a lot for the counselor to play with you, right? To be able to say, wow, like where'd that come from? Let's look at that. Or if you prefer to be in the feminine and you really have trust issues, like even if this person is trustworthy, I still can't relax. Let's talk about that. So you may be able to flesh it out without even saying, the masculine, feminine union, all that. You may be able to actually get under it and just be descriptive about it without using those words. Yeah, because I'm getting feedback that this is anti-feminist, and I really, really don't agree with that. This polarity thing is important, but being descriptive could help. Well, and you know what's beautiful about the idea that it could be anti-feminist is the feminist movement was based in the idea of a lack of equality. We had to have the feminist movement to bring women back to a place of equality, which never should have been questioned, right? Because this is very equal. The feminine is very powerful. The feminine is the playground for the whole experience. The feminine is Mother Earth, and the masculine is the rain, is the lightning. It's the energy of it, but the feminine determines all. So in no way is this that the feminine is weak. That's just old patriarchal ideas. This is an absolute equality, equality, equality. The feminists got us to a place where we can talk about equality. Now we get to polarize again in equality, which is how we should have done it for the last couple millennia. But thank you for bringing up that. Well, thank you guys so much. This has been so wonderful. And thank you for your amazing questions. So I think this is just so important. And if anyone is interested in learning more, definitely check out my book, Divine Union. Go to katrinaboss.ca and find out about upcoming courses or even the training that's beginning in a couple of weeks. And all the information's there. You can even email me at katrinaboss.ca, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for anyone who's listening later. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks so much. See you guys later.